The anxious was not just a partner, they were the emotional scaffolding. They carried the weight of the relationship. When that scaffolding disappears, the avoidant is left to stand alone. And often, for the first time, they realize they don't know how. Let's be clear. This isn't about revenge. It's not about walking away to punish. It's about reclaiming dignity. The anxious person reaches a point where they've tried everything: words, compromise, patience, and they realize the only thing left is to choose themselves. It's not cold. It's not hard-hearted. In fact, it's the most loving thing they can do for both people. Now, here's the irony. The moment the anxious stops chasing is often the first time the avoidant is confronted with their own avoidance, because there's no one left to absorb the emotional labor, no one left to fill the silence with meaning. That silence becomes the teacher. And in that space, the avoidant either begins their own journey inward or they run again. But this time, there's no one following. You see, the dynamic doesn't end when someone walks away. That's just the beginning of the reckoning, because love built on fear of loss, fear of intimacy, fear of self, isn't sustainable. And the moment the anxious stops performing for love, the performance ends. What's left is truth. This is the pivot point. This is where real healing can begin, when we stop managing someone else's fear and start honoring our own value. Never underestimate the power of walking away with grace, because sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of the person who refuses to meet you. Let's get honest about something. Most people never stop to examine. It's not just that we fear losing someone, we fear losing ourselves. But the truth is, for a lot of people with an anxious attachment style, that fear has already become reality. Long before the relationship ends, they've been abandoning themselves over and over again in subtle, often invisible ways. And that's the wound beneath the wound. That's the real pain. Not just the other person pulling away, but what you've given up just to keep them close. Self-abandonment isn't always dramatic. It doesn't always look like quitting your job or giving up your values, though sometimes it does. More often it's in the micro moments. It's when you feel something's off, but convince yourself you're overreacting. It's when you want to say no, but you say yes because you're scared they'll leave. It's when you stop asking for your needs to be met because every time you try, you feel like a burden. Over time, these compromises start to erode your sense of identity. You become a version of yourself that's shaped around someone else's comfort zone. Now, here's what's tricky. To the anxious mind, this doesn't feel like abandonment. It feels like love. It feels like loyalty. It feels like being all in, because somewhere along the line you learn that love means sacrifice. You learn that connection requires compliance, and that illusion is powerful. So powerful that people will stay in cycles for years, decades even, chasing closeness at the expense of their own center. But what happens when you finally stop and ask, what part of me am I betraying just to stay connected? That question can shake your whole foundation, and it should, because it means you're starting to wake up. You cannot build secure connection by disconnecting from yourself. You can't create real intimacy by abandoning your truth. And here's the paradox. The more you shrink, the more you contort yourself to fit someone else's emotional availability, the less of you there actually is to connect to. You think you're getting closer, but you're disappearing. And the relationship you're trying so hard to preserve becomes a hollow shell, because you're not in it anymore, just a performance, just a projection. When you come back to yourself, when you say, I will no longer ignore what I feel, what I need, what I value, that's when the entire game changes. That's when you stop trying to earn love and start embodying it. You start showing up from a place of fullness, not fear. And the people who can't meet you there, they fall away. Not because you lost something, but because you found something deeper, your own self-respect. We talk a lot about boundaries, but the most powerful boundary you can ever set is the one you make with yourself. The promise that you will never again abandon who you are just to be chosen. You were never too much. You were just too willing to become less. Avoidance, don't get off easy. From the outside, it might look like they do. They're the ones who retreat, who go silent, who seem unaffected while the anxious partner is unraveling emotionally. They're composed, rational, detached. But don't mistake emotional distance for emotional strength, because what looks like control on the surface is often just a deeply practiced form of self-protection, and it comes at a cost.